Frank is back. Good to see you. Thank you for joining us, Daniel, all the way from Africa. It is so good to see you again.
Good to see you, Noel, again. Hi, everyone.
And, you know, while we're waiting, we have a number of folks who are still coming in. I'd love to just see who we have joining us from where. So if you don't mind, open up your chat and just give a quick hello to everybody from your location. I'm calling in today from Arlington, Virginia. I feel like I'm back home for the first time in a very long time. So I'm excited to be here working in my office at home. Oh, hey, Norbert, it's good to see you again. Yeah, we've got lots of familiar faces and names. All right, I see David's back. Let's see, let's go to the second. Hi, Gladys, welcome. Dirk, wonderful. We got Texas, UK. Thank you for joining us, Alan. Robert is also here from Uganda. So a few of the folks from Africa are with a company that we work with called Partners for Food Security. Did I get that one right? I always say it wrong. Yeah.
Partners in Food Solutions.
Partners in Food Solutions.
Solutions, darn it, I knew it was wrong. These are people who are literally solving world hunger. Such an incredible organization. If you haven't heard about it, Partners for Food Solutions, I recommend looking up what they're doing. Just an amazing team over there. And I see we have a number of them here. So we've got all over Bob from beautiful, exotic New Jersey. Those of you who don't know the US with a lot of familiarity might not get the potential for sarcasm in that. We've got Toronto, Queens, New York. Hi from the Philippines. Wonderful. Zambia, Minnesota, Uganda, Frankfurt, Germany. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Oh, thank you, Robert, for posting the URL for Partners in Food Solutions. All right, I think we've given folks enough time to join us. I'm going to go ahead and launch into the slides today. We actually have a lot of content to cover in such a short amount of time. Well, I'll just go ahead and launch into the slides and we'll see how this is going to go. I do want to point out to you that we'll provide links to the resources, a recording of the presentation, and the presentation deck itself. So there are a couple of points where you might want to take a screen capture. Also rest assured that you will have all of these resources and more within the next couple of days in your inbox. So as a reminder, this webinar is being recorded. We are going to have 30 minutes of presentation. I'm going to try not to be a complete wall of words, but you're mostly going to be listening to me for the first 30 minutes. And then we'll have 15 minutes at the end to answer your questions. And anytime you want to throughout the session, feel free to submit questions via the chat. Our producer today is Jenny Satcher. She'll be watching that chat. She'll interrupt me if it's a timely question, or we'll just keep track to use your questions during the Q&A. If you're game, I'd love to see your smiling faces, even if you're not smiling. Some of you might, especially on the West Coast, might be kind of hitting your first cup of coffee. And then throughout, we're going to be using some of the native features of Zoom, like polls and chats. I don't think we have any annotations in today's presentation, but you never know. I might change my mind on the fly. Most of all, I hope that you enjoy our time together. I know I always enjoy these conversations, and I swear there are times that I learn even more from you all than I think I can impart during these sessions. So let's get started. A little bit about me for those of you who are first-time joiners. My name is Noel Michalenko. I am the CEO of Trusted Advisor Associates. I have a background in consulting, primarily in strategy and management consulting, but almost entirely in the IT space. So I've worked with companies. Booz Allen was my first consulting career role, and then I spent 15 years with Computer Sciences Corporation. I will say my favorite job of all of my corporate jobs was the last position I held at CSC, which was Director of Client Development. And I think that's the position where I learned the most practically about building trust with other people. I do have an education entirely from here in the States, although I had the opportunity to study abroad, and in my undergraduate degree, I spent a year in France. So to familiarize you with Trusted Advisor Associates, for those of you who don't know us particularly well, we've been in this business for over 20 years. It launched with The Trusted Advisor, which was written in 2001 by Charlie Green, who's the founder of this organization, along with his co-partners, David Maister and Robert Galford. They reprised that with a 20th anniversary edition just last year. Actually, it came out in 2020, the year of the pandemic. Today, we're going to be drawing primarily from Charlie's second book, which is Trust-Based Selling, as we talk about how to pitch with confidence and how to deliver a pitch that will really appeal to your potential clients. And then I only point this out, the Trusted Advisor Field Book, which also has information on this, is much more of a practical guide for building trust in the field. So we have workshops, we have online learning, we can do custom programs, and that's the end of my sales pitch for what my organization does. Let's get into today's topic. And I just want to hear from you. When you're preparing to pitch somebody, you're setting up for that really important, whether you call it a sales pitch or an orals competition, or maybe it's just trying to make the sale. How do you feel as you're preparing for that pitch? And I want you to go ahead and open up that chat screen and chat to everybody. How do you feel when you're preparing to pitch? So excited. Norbert likes the challenge of a pitch. I know I often get real butterflies in my stomach. I'm nervous. Yeah, Dion, scattered, absolutely. Energized. Good. Anxious, but looking forward to it. Yeah, Daniel, kind of nervous. And so ambivalent. I like that. So yeah, so there's kind of two themes here. There are the folks that like the challenge of the pitch, and so it's energizing and exciting for you. And then there are some that maybe feel a little bit of anxiety or a little scattered. And when we're preparing for a pitch, just like any time that we're going to be, that there's a lot on the table, really, we feel that pressure and it can get in the way. Those of you who are familiar with our trust equation will recognize that as a sign of self-orientation, when our own thoughts are kind of really in our heads. Frank is serene, and Frank, that is no surprise from knowing you through all of these sessions together. So thank you for sharing how you feel. When we think about pitching, one of the reasons, like I said, that we get this wide range of emotions is because sometimes we don't really think about what's happening in the client's head when we're preparing for a pitch. So I want to start off today by setting the foundation of how B2B sales work. And a lot of times we don't think about it as discrete steps, but there are three discrete steps in the sales process, or in the buying process, I should say. The first step is when the client screens, right? So the screening step is where the client is trying to answer the question, can they do it? They're gathering data, they're looking at our website, they're assessing things like how many resources do we have to bring to them? What level of fit are our resources? Have we done this before with other people that they can find out about? So it's a lot of gathering information about us, either personally or as a company. And from that information, they can screen out those providers that may not be able to do the work. And typically they're left with a set of people who they believe can do the work. And they call that often a down select. So now that they have a smaller group of buyers or vendors from whom they can choose, they go into the second step in the process. The second step in the process is selection. In the selection step, this is where the client decides, do they want to work with us? So they've already determined that we're capable of doing it. They might want some reinforcement, right, to really convince themselves of our capability, but primarily they're selecting the vendor with whom they want to work. Now, the third step in the process, and this is where it might be surprising to some of you, This third step is they go back and justify that, right? They go back and they rationally justify the selection that they made with facts. Now, a couple of things are really important to understand about each of these steps. The first and third steps are highly rational. This is where they're looking at data, they're applying logic, they're screening against a set of criteria. And then in the justification phase, they're mapping the criteria to, or they're mapping the capabilities to those criteria to justify a decision. The selection step in the middle is almost entirely emotional. And because it's so emotional, the biggest cause of non-selection is staying in screening mode during the selection process, right? We have this tendency to want to continue to tell them why we can do or why we can do the job that they've put out there, and focus less on how we might do the job that they're asking for. And so we've already got the job interview. It's time to stop reading from that resume, right? Don't keep rehashing the credentials, the information that they already found out on their own. Instead, what's important during screening is focusing 100% on them and their issues. I will share with you, I went through this when I was at CSC, and we were selecting a company to help us with our account management processes. And the CEO, like the top tier, it was the CEO and all of his direct reports. I think I had about 5 recommendations from them of companies that they knew or had worked with. I had gone out and done a request for qualifications to a number of other companies. So the screening process, we went through probably 12 or 15 companies. We got it down to 3. Then it came time for selection. And the interesting thing about it was each of the 3 companies responded to my requests very differently. One company called me up and said, "Hey, this is a really great opportunity. Tell us a little bit about why you're looking for what you're looking for." And we had some really comfortable conversations. I, of course, wanting to be fair, reached out to the other 2 companies. I got a call back from one on a weekend saying, "Listen, I'm really busy. I've got a lot of stuff going on next week. So I don't think we need any more information. We'll just be prepared to come in and talk to your team." Okay, fine. The other one responded, and we did have some back and forth, but their primary theme was, "We've worked with your CEO a whole bunch." And when it came time to select the company, the 2 companies that really didn't want to have anything to do with us beforehand didn't really stand a chance against the one that did, because the company that came in had made such good emotional connections early on that they walked away with it. Now, the justification part was actually kind of difficult, because the CEO really liked the company that he had put forward. And I have to be honest with you, a lot of people on the panel really expected that they were just going to go with the company the CEO recommended. And yet, at the end of the day, they literally could not justify going with that decision. So this screening mode is incredibly powerful, especially if you feel like you're coming in without a solid background or without a lot of experience in working with your potential client already. Now, when we talk about selection, because it's more emotional than rational, it's less about telling them about how they would be working with you and more about giving them the experience of working with you. Right? Really let them know in that screening, in the pitch, in the presentation where you're really making the pitch, let them know what it would be like to work with you. Don't just keep telling them everything that they already know. It's easy to say this, but when we're in the moment, especially for those of you who are like me and feel a little bit of pressure, some anxiety, I've got a lot of stuff that I'm trying to keep in my head, even with lists and notes and presentations, there's just so much involved with doing a good pitch. And so I want to start off by talking about the mindset of selling. Trust-based selling at its core is about helping. The objective is to help the buyer do the right thing for the buyer. Now, this sounds really simple, but if you think about starting with this mindset, the objective of traditional selling, or the goal of traditional selling, is to get the sale. And that drives a whole bunch of behavior. Things like I have to convince them that I'm right. I have to give them a whole bunch of information so that they can back up the decisions, or so I can prove to them how capable we are. I need to tell them everything that I want them to know, right? And so you can probably hear it again, this sense of self-orientation, that the sale becomes all about me and what my goal is. The goal of trust-based selling, on the other hand, is simply to help the client. And just think about that for a second. Think about that mindset shift, that if I walk into a pitch with the idea that my job here is to help the client, all of those concerns about, do I get the sale? Am I telling them everything that I want them to know? Do they think I'm smart? All of those things go away, because we're both focused then on the most important thing in the room, and that is the client. So the goal of trust-based selling, being to help the client, is the first of 3 trust-based selling mindsets, that selling is not the goal. The goal is to help the client. The second mindset in trust-based selling is that the point is not to win, right? If we think about winning as the goal of the meeting or the goal of the pitch, then we're automatically setting ourselves up into a competitive relationship with our clients. What we want to be is on the same side of the table. So if we shift that mindset to there is only win-win, there cannot be a win-lose situation in a good sale in trust-based selling. If the client wins, we win. If we win, that means the client gets somebody who is really dedicated to helping them. And if it's anything else, it's going to end up as lose-lose. Now, the third mindset, this is getting us away from the idea that this interaction should be the focal point. There is no deal. The interaction itself, that transactional relationship, should only be a means to the end, which is the relationship itself. If we get so focused on this deal, on this sale, on this outcome of this meeting, then we lose the perspective of the relationship, thinking in long-term or at least medium-term perspectives. And for those of you who know or understand or have read about the 4 trust principles, this should resonate with you. A medium to long-term perspective. If instead of focusing on this deal, we look at it as one interaction in a whole series, say it's number 17 out of 46 interactions that we're going to have, again, it just takes that pressure off. So as you think about these mindsets and think about your selling and your pitching, I want to do a quick poll, and just to get a sense of which mindset is most impactful for you when it comes to trust-based selling. Selling is not the goal is to help the client. The point is not to win, there is only win-win, or there is no deal, there's only the relationship. Jenny, let's go ahead. There we go. Here's the poll. So just take 30 seconds and let's see what your answer is. Jenny, I can't see how many responses we have in. Are we close to having a full quorum on responses?
Yes, we have 24 out of 30.
All right, let's go ahead then, close the poll and let's see what everybody says. All right, so that core mindset that selling is not the goal is to help the client. Half of you said that's the most impactful. And then you're split evenly between the win-win and the relationship. Does someone want to come off mute and just share your perspective on how these mindsets impact your view of selling? Just to point out, you're all on mute. I know everybody's jumping to talk in right now.
Okay, this is Dion Brown. One of the most impactful business books for me is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And one of the habits is win-win. So I think the second and third go hand in hand, because win-win is grounded in relationship building, that you're not just solely self-serving, but you have empathy for the other party and you want to make sure their needs are met as well.
Dion, that's such a great perspective. Thank you for sharing it. And I love how you connected numbers 2 and 3. Thank you. All right, Frank, what's your perspective?
They all three are congruent. And the first time I heard this presented, A was the one that impacted me the most, but it's now so internalized that the other two are more important to me.
Excellent. So for you, it's part of your growth path.
Yes.
Yeah, so I love that. So it's so true. Like in anything, we get something that seems new and we internalize it and it becomes part of who we are. And that kind of frees us up to look at the next layer beyond that. Very cool. All right. Thank you guys for sharing that. I appreciate it.
Noel, can I come in and share something?
Absolutely, Daniel.
Yeah, for me, I think A stands out. Selling is not the goal. The goal is to help. With that, the client feel the sense of you being part of them. Like there is that element of empathy in you and understanding of where they are, and probably want to come alongside them as a team, together with them, move together with them. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Daniel. I like that perspective, right? It's a shift from being on opposite sides of the table to being on the same side of the table and truly collaborative. Excellent. Any more comments? All right, then let's move into it because, I want to get into the 9 tips or 9 rules for perfecting your pitch. Nice. Farwani just put in the chat that the work becomes purposeful when you're helping the client. That's a great point. And I want to be clear before we get into these 9 rules. There is no single perfect pitch. Right? The winning pitch is going to be situational to you and to your client. So while I'm telling you 9 rules for perfecting your pitch, you still need to take the judgment and use the judgment for how to apply these in your pitches. I am, however, going to start off with the number 1 rule, which is avoiding the pitch altogether. Now, this sounds crazy. And by the way, a lot of what I talk about might sound a little bit crazy to you, but bear with me as we go through this, right? Sometimes the best pitch is one that actually never happens because both parties choose an alternative. Right? So if you think about a pitch as a blind date, where each party is cautious, we don't necessarily want to show everything about ourselves. The buyer is quietly cautious because they want to control the process, right? They want to think about it as an impersonal event. They don't want to put themselves out there and take the risk. The seller also wants control, but we express it usually by being more assertive. So one person is afraid of being sold, the other person is afraid of losing. And when both parties are fearful like this, well, decisions get made on process, features, price, not on what real selection should be, which is, do I want to work with this person? Both parties are usually better off starting from a strong relationship, right? And even though we both know this, we're still probably going to engage in the same old processes that we do. So the trick, and it's not really a trick, is to explore the possibility of meeting before it comes time for a pitch, right? Sellers might try to go around the pitch process. This isn't so much about going around the process as it is truly getting a feel for what the customer needs and also letting them get a feel for what it's like to work with you. Just like in my story, that opening conversation with the vendor that we finally selected, wanting to understand, why are we looking for help? Getting to know our company a little bit, understanding how we work and what's important, the priorities that we have. So Sometimes if you have those kinds of relationships and conversations, the client may abandon the idea of having a pitch altogether. You may find through your conversations that you've identified the right way forward and you're both in agreement that it's a good fit. It's generally a good outcome for both parties. Now, don't try to force the outcome, right? If what you're trying to do is force them not to go into a pitch, often it's going to backfire, because that's then coming back to our own self-orientation, and you'll jinx it. So when you can't avoid the pitch altogether, the second rule is don't skip the pre-pitch warm-up. Oops, sorry, I'm hitting too many buttons here at once. Right? Your objective shouldn't be to avoid the pitch, but to get a good outcome for both parties. And the best way to do this is by having some understanding of what they're looking for and giving them some understanding of who they would be working with before you get to the pitch. If you're meeting the customer for the first time at the pitch, your odds are even less than 1 divided by the number of competitors, right? We might go into it thinking that we've got 30% chance of winning because there are 3 competitors coming in. But what we don't take into account is that one of the choices the client might make is to scrap the project altogether if they don't feel like they have that good fit. So not every client wants to meet us in advance. What can we do? Sometimes they're not allowed to because of procurement rules. How far do you know to push the suggestion for pre-meetings? And the simple answer is just ask the customer. Give them a say in the pre-pitch warm-up, if you will. Point out the advantages of offering all competitors a chance to talk with them in advance. And if the resistance is too strong, gracefully yield, just walk away, right? The old saying, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. If you can talk to people before the pitch, however, you'll really improve the quality of the pitch, both for you and for your clients. All right, let's see, we've got something coming in the chat. What is a pitch? Robert, great question. So for those of you who aren't as familiar with our lexicon, a pitch is that opportunity that you have to sell to a client, right? We call it a lot of names. It may be the sales presentation, or it may be an orals presentation on the back of a written proposal, but it is an interactive proposal where you are bringing a proposed solution to a client who has requested it. Most often, a pitch or a sales presentation is done in a competitive situation. So your client may be considering multiple vendors to do a single project. Thank you for jumping in with that question. It's an excellent question. All right, let's go back to the rules for perfecting your pitch. Rule number 3, interact in the pitch. It's easy to prepare a presentation and to think that we know everything that the client wants to hear. And so we often do, like I warned you up front, I was going to do in this presentation, we often just start off by telling them everything we think that they should know. And while that can be informative, you can have kind of the same impact by just giving them a written proposal. Right? So the only way that they're truly going to get to know you and what it's like to work with you is by being able to interact during the pitch. Usually they'll start off with something like, tell us about yourselves. This is one of the really dangerous questions in a sales conversation because it sounds like they want you to tell them about yourself. What they really mean is tell us about us. And so don't skip over the question. Answer it fairly succinctly, point out to them that you've given them more information about your capabilities, and then quickly try to turn the conversation around to them. Right? Get them focused on their issues. Give them opportunities to pitch in, to be a part of the conversation. Because let's be honest, listening to somebody, go back to that blind date scenario, listening to somebody talk about themselves for 30 minutes isn't all that interesting at the end of the day if you don't get the chance to jump in. So letting the client be heard is critical for a successful sales conversation. You can tell them ahead of time that you want to ask for their reactions. You can build in questions. So what about you? Here's what we've experienced. Here's what we've seen with other clients. How do you feel about it? Right? Or you can offer data about similar situations. We've seen this before, and then ask them to comment on it. But the point is getting them to talk more about them. Once you've gotten them to talk about them, however, we can't just leave it wide open. So it's important to have a point of view when we go into the sales pitch, right? And what I mean by having a point of view is that while all of your credentials, all of your solutions, everything that you're bringing to the table are critically important, they're not worth anything unless you can show the client that you can add value to them. It has to be relevant specifically to them. To walk in without a point of view on the client and their issues and just have an open conversation, those are the things that should be happening in the pre-pitch warm-up. When it actually comes time for the pitch, if you go in without a point of view, it can be arrogant, it can be perceived as disrespectful, and quite frankly, it's selfish. Now, these are pretty strong words, so let me back that up a little bit. If you want the job, right? Think about the situation where you're trying to get a job. Hopefully, you've thought about what you would do if you actually won the work. So why wouldn't you share with them how you see the solution going? The answer is probably because you're afraid that you might get it wrong. But that fear is all fear about you. Because what's the worst case scenario? If you show up in the pitch and you say, here's how I would address the situation, and they say, we're not sure that's right. Now you're in the ideal situation because you can collaborate with them. You can get their perspective on what it is, where you're off, what they're really looking for. You might uncover additional information. So having a point of view is both respectful to the client, demonstrates that you can be relevant to them, and it is potentially an opportunity to dive deeper into what they want. Rule number 5, collaborate on talking price. The conventional wisdom when it comes to sales is to hold the price till the end. Make sure that they understand all of the benefits that they would get so that they can correctly calculate the value proposition of what you're selling. But if you're going through all of your benefits, you have to recognize that every single buyer out there is slightly, at least, distracted by the thought of how much is this going to cost? So if you don't want to lead off with a discussion about cost, one thing you could do, bring in a stack of papers, right? And put them face down on the table in front of your client. And then start off by saying, listen, I realize that price is an important part of any decision. I'm prepared to talk about it at any point that you want. In front of you is our price and the data that backs up how we got to it. And so if at any point in time, you want to pause the conversation, flip that over and talk about the price, we can do that. It lets the pressure off on the price conversation. And then again, it's an entryway because now you're not talking about how you would do the work and then suddenly slamming a price on the end of it with no discussion. It gives them the choice of whether or not they want to discuss price. And so again, moving it away from what I want to do and my control of the conversation to give the customer some control over the conversation. Rule number 6, PowerPoint pointers, right? No good sales pitch happens without a PowerPoint or some other presentation. And so as you're thinking about how to prepare your presentation and then actually present it, here are a few tips or a few pointers on your PowerPoints. 1, think of your presentation more as a leave behind, right? So limit yourself to a few bullets, be on point, but be engaged. Then second, don't just read the bullets that are on your slides. They can read as well as you can. Provide the commentary that goes behind the high points that you pointed out in the bullet points. Get a picture from what the points are and talk about them. Really provide the power bringing those concepts to life. Visuals are great. Use photos, use clip art, right? A picture is worth 1,000 words. Except for the title page, lose some of the logos in the backgrounds. Nobody wants to see a presentation that has the vendor's logo on every single page, unless it's like a tiny, like ours. I'm looking at my own presentation saying, I wonder why I don't have it this way, right? But unless it's in a footer kind of situation. Mostly just be aware of what your PowerPoint says about you, and don't try to let the PowerPoint do the talking for you. The whole point of the pitch is for you to show what it's like to work with them, for you to show them what it's like to work with you. Rule number 7, don't overemphasize your qualifications. This goes back to staying in screening mode, not selection mode. They've got your qualifications, give them a leave behind, prepare a written page that has references, that has other clients you work with, that has all of the data about your company or all of the qualifications that make you right for this. And then quickly move on to their issues, to what's important to them. Number 8, I don't think I need to say much about this one. Never, ever put the competition down. There are 2 reasons for this. One, you have no idea what their relationship is to the competition. So it's incredibly risky. You could end up saying something bad about someone that they've been working with, or an organization that they've been working with very successfully. It could be somebody who's related to them. You just don't know enough. Second, and much more importantly, it's more of a moral imperative, is to take the high ground and demonstrate your integrity by not denigrating another company. If they ask you point blank what your thoughts are about the competition, you can respectfully suggest that they should talk to the competition about the competition, because the competition is the one best able to talk about themselves. If they're insistent, try to gently turn the conversation back. I can't speak to how the competition works because I don't have experience with them. However, what our clients say about us, or when we have competed for work against them, some of the things that we feel made us stand out. And focus on what you bring to the table, not what the competition may not bring to the table. And then the final rule for perfecting your pitch is knowing when to ditch the pitch. I have another story here. When I was consulting, there was a partner in the firm who was known for going in to potential clients with 50-page PowerPoint decks. And they were the old school type of PowerPoint, where the first 15 pages were all about our qualifications, our credentials, how many consultants we had, the type of work we had done, who our clients are. And if the client, there's actually a story where he was in the middle of a pitch and the client stopped him and said, hey, hang on a second, like this is all good. What I really need is XYZ. Right? And that never happens. Clients almost never just get to the crux of what they need. And the partner sighed and he said, well, if you'll hold on, we'll get to that. And then he went back and started again at the beginning. Now think how frustrating that must have been for that client, right? So if you're faced with a client who is either deeply skeptical and starts diving in, who wants to dive deep into one thing that you've talked about, let go of the pressure that you have to get through your whole presentation. If they ask a question that you know is answered on slide 15, but you're only on slide 3, go to slide 15. It's important to recognize when what's top of mind for the customer is guiding where they want to hear you go, and then go there with them. So that's what I mean when I say know when to ditch the pitch. It just means understand when to follow the client in their conversation. All right, I'm going to pause there. For those of you who like to take screenshots, here are your 9 rules for perfecting your pitch. Avoid the pitch altogether. Don't skip the pre-pitch warm-up. Interact in the pitch. Have a point of view. Collaborate on talking price and get it out of the way early. Gave you a few PowerPoint pointers. Don't overemphasize your own qualifications. Make sure that you're in the right mode, in the right step of selection, not screening. Don't put the competition down, and know when to ditch the pitch. So with that, I am going to open it up for you first before we go to questions, just to share your biggest takeaway. If you could please open up your chat, what really resonates out of those 9 rules to ditch the pitch? Nice, the golden opportunity to interact. Thanks, Frank. Good. Thanks, Edwin. Keep these coming in. These are great. Such great takeaways. All right. I know I talked a little bit longer than I intended to. Let's do a quick, Jenny, we've got a poll, I think. I just want to get a sense from you if this content was helpful to you. So Jenny, go ahead and pop that up. Just a quick thumbs up, thumbs down. All right. And while you're answering that, I'm going to go ahead and open it up for questions. Okay. What questions do you have? I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing the slides and open it up to you. Well, I have to say, I love it when I nail it and there are no questions. What about comments? I mean, anyone who wants to come off mute and share your own experiences of either a pitch when, you know, everything just fell into place and what you see the impact of trust building being on that, or a pitch where maybe it didn't go the way you wanted it to, and how you might think about it.
Well, I just want to say that you've nailed it. I don't think I've got any questions at the moment. You've nailed it.
Thank you, Daniel. I love it. All right, well, we are at the time. So it is 11:45 in the morning here on the East Coast of the US. I'm going to thank you all very much for joining us today. As I said, we'll send out a copy of the slide deck, a link to this recording, and some additional resources, including a blog written by Charlie on this very topic. So I look forward to seeing you again. Our next Trust Matters webinar will be in 2 weeks. I'm sorry, gosh, in 2 months. And as you go, I'll just leave up here for you to consider some other resources that are available from Trusted Advisor Associates. Thank you all for your time and for being with us today. Take care.